Do you feel like sugar is a dirty word? Well, I think it's funny because most adults know that we should be eating less sugar, but yet we have it at the end of a lot of our meals, and it's in our freezer, it's in our pantries, it's at our birthday parties, it's at our Christmas party, it's everywhere. Sugar is everywhere. And we all know that we should be consuming less of it, but we continue to crave it and to make it part of our daily lives. So we're going to get into the science behind how sugar interacts in our system, the historical context of sugar with us like as a species and in culture, and then we're going to talk about emotional components of sugar and why we crave it. And I'm going to share a little bit of my story of how I worked with and managed sugar over my weight loss and health journey. I look a lot different than I did just a few years ago. So it's no surprise that when I'm out and about in my community or I'm hanging out with friends or family, people kind of ask me about my wellness journey. And one of the things that comes up frequently is talking about our dirty word for today, sugar. And it's so interesting to me when people tell me about their sugar addiction or the things they can't give up or their things that they like have to, they're like, oh, I'm so bad. I'm so bad about. And I think it's like we have these grown adults shaming themselves about the food that they're eating. And it is no surprise because we all have sort of identified sugary foods as junk foods, but we're still so compelled to consume them, have them in our pantries, our cupboards, our cards, our desk drawer. And we're going to talk about why that is today. And we're going to talk about how you can sort of empower yourself to have a little bit of a different relationship with sugar. I want to touch briefly on my story, and a little later on, I'll tell you of what I did to sort of get my relationship a little bit better with sugar. So as a young person, I grew up, my family pantry was full of Pringles and Gushers and Little Debbie's and soda, and I could eat all of it as much as I wanted. And I think that's very common for a lot of us growing up, 90s, early 2000s. We have these like big moves in advertising and in culture to like identify with these brands and bring them in our homes. There were tons of commercials everywhere. And of course, that's when Pepsi and Coke started getting big celebrities to sort of advertise on TV. So of course these things would be in my home because at the time there was no definition between these products being like real food compared to like real food, like whole fruits, vegetables, grains. We just thought, oh, like it's food. Yeah, I can eat. It's fine. It's all good. So growing up, even from like a young teen, I had chronic yeast infections. Don't get weirded out, people. Like this is a common thing for women, children, even men can get them. And then later on in life, they presented themselves like as skin rashes and things. And so I was itchy for years and just couldn't get to the bottom of it with traditional prescriptions and medication. So that really, when I figured out what my underlying cause was, that challenged me to really sort of change things up. So I had a Candida overgrowth, which is an overgrowth of yeast in the bacteria. What can happen is certain bacteria that are naturally occurring in our system get choked out by the ones that feed heavily on that sugar. And then that can present itself as rashes and affect how our body processes different things. And so when you're itchy for years and years and years, you're willing to do a lot of things to try to make a change. And my goal is to help you maybe think about how sugar might be affecting you and your health so that you don't have to end up itchy or with other conditions that we'll talk about as we go on today. So the historical context of sugar to me is fascinating. I love history. So in 1700s, Americans were consuming about 4 pounds of sugar a year, just a little bit. By 1900, it was 80 pounds. And by the early 2000s, it was 180 pounds. So just for reference, I weigh just under 200 pounds. So like me walking around is like what most Americans consume. And the reason that our system hasn't caught up yet is because we're we've been around a while as a species, and our sugar content used to just come from, oh, we'd find berries and we're like, I gotta gobble these up. And we got a short, quick blood sugar spike that let our brain know that those things were good and gave us a quick boost to energy so we could maybe keep going and hunting across the prairie or the savannah. So our bodies just have not caught up with the amount of sugar that is available to us because of commercial manufacturing. The other thing to think about is most of the foods that we consume that have a high sugar content are brand names. If you're in your kitchen every Sunday, you're baking some cookies, like, and that's kind of your sugar content, like you have to work for that, right? But most of the sugar that we consume is readily available to us on the shelves at the grocery store. And ultimately, it's some of our biggest corporations and multinational corporations that are profiting from selling us these foods. So, of course, they're going to make them more addictive, more attractive. They're going to pour tons of money into marketing so that you have to buy more. I kind of think about it as intellectual and emotional freedom by not giving in to these ploys of these consumer companies. I feel like I am empowered over my health. So there's sort of that like social, societal component to it for me also. It's not really helping our culture any or helping our health any. The science about what sugar does in our system really fires me up. I'm not a health professional, but I have lived out these experiences and I've worked with health professionals. I've done the research, I've read books. And so I feel comfortable sharing this information with you. Of course, reach out to your health professional. But there are things that we're ignoring and we're not talking about, and I'm gonna call them out today. So, an increased blood sugar spikes over time can contribute to type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, obesity, and there's more research emerging about the connection to Alzheimer's and cancer. I don't know about you, but those are things I would rather not have. And it's funny how these like little sweet and indulgent things and the things that are supposed to bring us pleasure really do result in these sort of scarier effects. Higher blood sugar also causes the body to produce inflammatory molecules in the central nervous system. You're asking your body to respond and do this thing that it wasn't really designed to do. And I was talking earlier about my health challenges with my gut. Higher blood sugar reduces microbial diversity and depletion of short chain fatty acids in the mucosal immune system that you have naturally occurring in the lining of your gut. These are serious health challenges, and I want you to live in your day to day free of worry of these things. And don't worry, if you've been a sugaraholic for a long time, your body can definitely recover. It's incredible. It's amazing. But I think it's important to really seriously consider these things when we're making those impulsive decisions to pick something up off the shelf. The way that human brains are wired, we're not really wired to think about the long-term effect from our decisions. We are really wired more to respond to our immediate environment. And we love that quick hit of dopamine in our brains that we get from consuming that sugar. So that's just something to think about for long-term health and wellness. You are really investing in your future today. When I realized I had to start working on curbing my sugar consumption to really heal my gut and deal with those associated challenges, I struggled. I wanted it. I wanted the sugar all the time. I used to work in a candy shop. So I had total access to all the sugar and all the candy that I wanted. And I got to tell you, like, it was super challenging. It was an uphill battle. And I struggled like that for years. I would quit sugar several times a year, and I would do this thing where I would beat myself up. The key to unlocking my relationship with sugar was to really get help from a nutrition professional and one who specialized in emotional eating. I'm not saying you have to do that. There's some great books out there. Send me a message on Instagram. I'll give you some recommendations. There are lots of resources you can get for help. I definitely would encourage you to check out some resources about intuitive eating. And that really kind of leads into like the emotional components of why we reach for the foods that we do. So it's not just the taste that you're experiencing. There's a whole emotional reaction and a chemical reaction happening in between like your brain and your hormones that kind of get released in your system when you process these foods in your body. So Ultimately, what I came to understand is the reason I couldn't quit sugar. Number one, our brains don't like absolutes. So that's where the intuitive eating comes into play. But for me, I realized I didn't want to quit. I liked having it as a crutch. I liked when I would go to parties and other people would be, slinging back glasses of wine. And I was like, oh, well, if they're going to do that, then I'll eat a dessert. At least that's the thing I get to have. Like, I get to have something, don't I? Like, don't I get to have something special? And I realized like it was an emotional crutch for me. And I wanted to be free of that. I did not want to have that, that little ping that happens in your brain. You're like, need a snack, need some sugar, need a piece of candy bar, need, whatever's lurking in your desk drawer or the ice cream tub, you just need a spoonful of ice cream. I wanted to be free of that. I wanted my brain to be able to do what it was designed to do, which is support me through my daily systems throughout the day. I wanted to be able to be creative. I wanted to reduce brain fog. All those are things that can come when you consume less sugar. And ultimately, figuring out emotionally why I was reaching for that sugar was freedom for me. And it really frustrates me when I hear people on the TV or whatever, are like, calories in, calories out. This drug will fix you. But if you never address the underlying reason of why you're reaching for that food, you are always going to struggle. Whew, I know, girl, was intense there, but it has been so freeing for me. And I want that for you too. And we cannot underplay how our different body systems interact with each other. It's more complicated than calories in, calories out. It's more complicated than just cut your carbs a little bit or don't buy it, don't bring it in the house. If your brain is still caught in that cycle of like cue, response, reward, you're going to always have that struggle and that challenge. And I don't want that for you. If you watch some of my other videos, you probably heard me talk about this, but I think it's important to keep this in the forefront. And to me, it's an easy, attainable number to kind of work with. So men should not have more than 9 teaspoons of sugar a day, and women is 6, which is about, for women, that's about 25 grams. For men, it's 36 grams of sugar. So just for reference, a large apple has 23 grams of sugar. And a small Starbucks latte has 19 grams of sugar. And nobody gets the small and nobody gets just the plain latte, right? We all get the caramel pump and all the things. And before you tell me, oh, I'll just do some monk fruit, I'll just use agave, those things can still cause a blood sugar spike and can still cause inflammation in your system. They're also going to continue that addiction cycle because they still cause the release of dopamine for you. And I know I'm using the word addiction and I know that word is scary to people, but physiologically, that's what's happening. You don't have to blame yourself. There's no blame, there's no shame. Your body is simply responding to what you put in it. I don't want you to walk away and feel bad about yourself. It is helpful to understand how our body systems work so that we can remove some of that blame and shame. So I would just encourage you to really think about eating foods closest to their natural source. So what does that mean? It means a whole apple, not apple crisps or apple juice. It means eating things like a whole potato instead of the package of potatoes. It means eating lean whole proteins. So I kind of feel like this might be starting to sound a little bit like a diet, which I'm not excited about. But here's what I think about is like, if we eat the foods that our ancestors ate for decades, for millennia, we're going to probably feel pretty good. All this other stuff, all the sugars, all the processed things, all the branded things, those were not things around when our bodies were evolving and changing. One of the quickest ways to feel better is to start eating those foods closest to their natural source. I love doing a Whole30 as kind of like a boost. And I would just challenge you to really limit those carbs and sugar and sugary drinks. That's a really quick hit to your system. Just give it a try. Give it a try for a week, a month, a couple of months. And when you're doing that, if you're feeling that emotional response come up to reach for something, to grab for something, to numb with some food, sit with those emotions and really process them. Think about where you're feeling them in your body. try to maybe get to the root of where that comes from and do some deep breathing and processing. Also, creating some space in between when you get the craving and satisfying the craving. So, set a timer for 10 minutes. Get up and go for a walk. Busy yourself with something else, or just stop and pause and do some deep breathing. That can really kind of help with the emotional components. So, I told you I would just touch on my story a little bit at the end. So, to date, my itchiness is under control. I'm not having the severe reactions that I used to have. Eating this way, limiting foods with tons of ingredients, processed carbs, sugar, those sort of things have really allowed me to become closer to my natural weight without a ton of effort, without, making up all sorts of different foods for different diets. And like, if I just eat some lean protein. I eat an apple every once in a while with some peanut butter, and I'm eating veggies. Like, the weight falls off. And maybe for you, it's not about weight, but let's think about long-term health. I always think about, are the things that I'm consuming, that I'm putting in my beautiful body that's here on this planet right now, are those things contributing to my health or taking away from it? And likely, if they have long lists of ingredients and lots of sugar, they're not going to be contributing to your health. Ultimately, I'm wishing you well. Please, let's have a conversation about this. Hit me up on Instagram. You could download my 3-month low tox guide. That would be a great start to kind of cleaning up your diet. Comment below here on this YouTube channel, and I would love to hear your thoughts.